Think you need watercolors to get that beautiful watercolor look? Well, think again. Today I'm creating a gorgeous watercolor panel without using a single watercolor paint. Instead, I'll show you how to turn your distress ink pads into beautiful watercolor palettes to color this stunning image from the latest Sizzix birthday release. Hi everyone, I'm Revati and welcome to my crafty space. Sizzix is celebrating its 25th birthday with an incredible collection of new products, and today I'll be using this absolutely gorgeous birthday bloom stamp set designed by Willow Wolfe. Now, this set includes 10 beautiful nature inspired images. We have a lovely happy birthday sentiment, some gorgeous floral bouquets, sweet little hummingbirds, butterflies, and even an adorable little bunny. Now, be sure to head over to the Sizzix website and join the 25th birthday celebration, where you will find exciting new product launches, amazing savings, and plenty of fun prizes throughout that celebration. Well, I'm going to be stamping almost every image from this beautiful set onto a watercolor panel to create one large whimsical garden scene. Now, since summer is in full bloom here in Seattle, I thought this design would be perfect way to capture what I get to enjoy right outside my window almost every day. We have gorgeous flowers blooming everywhere, tiny little hummingbirds darting from flower to flower, colorful butterflies fluttering through our garden, and every now and then we do get little bunnies hopping around the hill in our backyard. It is such a peaceful and inspiring sight, so I wanted to bring a little bit of that summer magic into my card today. To get started, I place my watercolor panel onto the Sizzix stamping platform. One feature I absolutely love is the sticky backing surface. It keeps the panel securely in place so nothing shifts while I'm arranging and stamping all of these images. Once I was happy with the layout, I ran my anti-static powder tool over the entire panel since I plan on heat embossing all these images. This quick step helps prevent any stray embossing powder from sticking where I don't want it to, giving me a nice crisp embossed line that will make watercoloring so much more easier in our next step. Once I was happy with the placement of all the stamps, I inked them up using VersaFine Onyx Black ink. Now, since it's a pigment ink, it stays wet long enough to hold the embossing powder beautifully, making it perfect for heat embossing. To make sure I got a nice crisp impression, I stamped the images twice using the stamp platform. That's one of the biggest advantages of using a stamp positioner. You can easily re-ink and stamp again without worrying about anything shifting. Now, just before I was sprinkling on the embossing powder, I realized there were a few empty spaces on my panel. Now, my original vision was to create one continuous lush floral scene. So instead of leaving those gaps, I simply rearranged a few of those stamps to fill in the open spaces. Well, thanks to the sticky surface on the Sizzix stamping platform, my panel stayed perfectly in place while I moved the stamps around. I inked them up again with the VersaFine pigment ink and stamped those additional images to complete the composition. Now, the entire panel feels full, balanced, and ready for the next step. Once all of the images were stamped, I carefully lifted the panel out of the stamping platform, making sure not to touch any of that freshly stamped image since the pigment ink stays wet for a while. I then covered the entire panel with clear embossing powder, tapped off the excess, and then melted it off with my heat tool until all of those beautiful black lines turned nice and glossy. Now, even though I'm working with a watercolor panel, which is much thicker than your regular cardstock, I still like to take a few extra precautions to minimize warping. Before I begin the heat embossing process, I let my heat tool warm up completely. That way, I'm applying heat for a shorter amount of time. I also place my panel on top of a cork mat, which helps absorb some of that heat from underneath and keep the heat tool moving continuously instead of holding it at one spot for too long. It wasn't until I finished all of that heat embossing and was ready to start coloring that I noticed that I completely missed off stamping the Y in birthday. Thankfully, it's an easy fix, so don't worry, we'll come back and take care of it at the very end. Now it's time for my favorite part for today's project, that is creating our own watercolor palette using distress ink pads. This is such a fun technique because you get beautiful look of watercolor without needing actual watercolor paints. I'm keeping the coloring process nice and simple. There is no complicated shading techniques or advanced coloring skills involved here. My goal is to simply enjoy the coloring process by picking up individual colors and painting each of the flowers, leaves, hummingbirds, butterflies, and all of the other little details. Sometimes simple coloring is all you need to create a beautiful finished piece. Now, to create my watercolor panel, I simply pressed or smooshed my distress ink pad directly onto my glass mat. Now, if you don't own a glass mat, don't worry at all. You can use a smooth plastic packaging that comes with your craft supplies, an acrylic block, a craft sheet, or any other non porous slick surface. That little puddle of ink instantly becomes your watercolor palette. Now, before I start painting, I lightly misted it with a bit of water. This thins out the ink slightly, making it flow much more like your traditional watercolor. It also prevents me from picking up overly concentrated color on my paintbrush, giving me much softer, more controlled washes as I start bringing this beautiful garden scene to life. I'll have the complete list of all the distress ink colors that I used linked in the description box below in case you'd like to recreate this color palette. For my flowers, I chose a beautiful combination of pink shades while the leaves were colored using a couple of different shades of greens to add a little bit more of that natural variation. When it comes to the hummingbirds and the butterflies, I decided to have a little more fun with the blending as I mixed two colors together on each of those. That was purely a personal choice. I wanted those tiny creatures to really stand out against our floral background. And one of the things I love the most about this technique is that it's incredibly forgiving. You can keep it simple, as I am doing here with just basic washes of color, or if you're more experienced with watercoloring, you can absolutely take it a step further by adding shadows, highlights, and extra layers of colors. There really isn't a right or wrong way to do it. Just enjoy the process and let your creativity guide you as you bring this beautiful garden scene to life. Once all the images were colored, I wanted to add a little more depth and interest to the background. To do that, I created a very soft wash using the lightest shade of pink from my Distress ink collection. I simply smooshed the ink pad onto my glass mat once or twice, added plenty of water, and then mixed it together to create a very diluted color. Using a larger paintbrush, I began applying that soft pink wash across the entire background. My goal wasn't to create a perfectly even layer of color. In fact, I wanted the background to feel loose, natural, and organic, so I intentionally worked in a very relaxed manner. I wasn't overly concerned about staying perfectly within the margins around the stamped images, and I allowed the color to flow naturally around all the flowers and critters. As the panel dried, there were some areas that ended up with slightly deeper concentration of that pink, while other areas remained much lighter because of that little extra water. Those subtle variations in the colors are actually one of my favorite parts of this watercoloring. The soft transition create movement and interest in the background without competing with the focal point images. I absolutely love how this panel has come together. The colors feel so soft and dreamy, and that subtle pink wash in the background adds the perfect touch of warmth without taking away from that beautiful stamped images. It almost feels like a little summer garden captured on paper. Now, to add a little more texture and interest to this otherwise simple background, I decided to bring in some splatters. And the fun part is, we are going to use our distress inks for this step as well. Now, just like we created watercolor palette earlier, these inks work beautifully as splatter mediums too. I simply smooshed a little bit of that pink and yellow distress ink onto my glass mat, added a touch of water, and picked up the diluted color with my paintbrush. Then, with a few gentle taps of my paintbrush, I added splatters all over the panel. I feel those tiny pops of color add so much character and help tie the entire design together while keeping that soft, whimsical watercolor feel. Remember that little missing Y in the birthday that I noticed earlier? Well, it's time to fix that little mistake. I simply used a black gel pen to carefully complete the letter, and just like that, our sentiment is back to looking perfect. And honestly, this is one of those little crafting moments that reminds us not everything has to be perfect from the very beginning. Sometimes a tiny fix like this is all you need, and now this little secret stays just between me and all of you watching the video. Unless you were here for the process, no one would ever know there was a missing letter in the very first place. Coming back to our card, I felt like this beautiful watercolor scene needed a little bit of extra sparkle and shine to complete it. So I bought out my metallic watercolors and added some delicate gold splatters all across the panel. Yes, I didn't have any gold ink pad, so this is what we are working with. These touches of shimmer catch the light beautifully and add an elegant finish to the soft watercolor background. I also used the gold watercolor to create a thin border around the entire panel. This simple detail instantly elevated the design and gave it a beautiful vintage, almost framed picture look. I absolutely love how the warmth of that gold complements the soft pinks and greens in the scene. It felt like this entire garden moment had been captured inside a little golden frame, making the finished piece feel extra special. Lately, I've been creating quite a few pieces of artwork and framed projects, so when I looked at this finished panel, I honestly felt like it deserved to be framed as well. The soft watercolors, that beautiful little green details, golden border almost make it feel like a miniature piece of artwork. But since we included the happy birthday sentiment in this design, I knew this one was meant to be a beautiful handmade card. Although I have to admit, if that sentiment wasn't there, I would have been very tempted to turn this into another framed piece for my craft room. Once all of that watercolor was completely dry, I then went ahead and added some foam tape and adhered the panel onto a top folding A2 size card base. This gives the card a sturdy foundation while allowing that beautiful watercolor scene to take center stage. And with that, our beautiful watercolor inspired birthday card is complete. I absolutely love how this entire panel came together, from creating our own watercolor palettes using the distress inks to that soft floral scene, delicate splatters, and those little detailed touches of gold that added the perfect amount of elegance to this card. Now, this card was such a joy to create, and it feels extra special because we are celebrating an amazing milestone. A very happy 25th birthday to Sizzix. Wishing Sizzix many more years of creativity, innovation, and inspiring crafters around the world with your beautiful products. Well, I will be sure to link all the supplies that I used to create this beautiful card in the description box below. Please note that all of those links will be affiliate links, which means that if you shop using one of my links, I'll get a small commission at no cost to you guys. Thank you again for joining me today. Until next time, stay safe.